Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Maureen and I am starting off my DIY gift series this week with this quilt block sweatshirt. So can I just tell you how much I adore this sweatshirt and how much this really struck up a great conversation in my booth over the weekend at a local craft fair. So I thought this would be the perfect thing to start off the series. So in this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to actually cut the squares and actually build this quilt block and design your own. So I'm also linking the supplies that you need down below. And just to let you know, this is a thrifted sweatshirt and I'm upcycling it. So this project will probably cost you less than $10. So grab your sewing tools and let's go ahead and get started.
So we are making a 12 by 12 quilt block, and every single time I do any sort of quilting activity, I always grab some grid paper and I actually draft out the design I want. And I've picked these three fabrics because I feel like they complement each other well. And so I had to do a couple of different sketches because I only have 8 of the white and I had more of the darker fabrics. And so basically I'm going to leave my notebook with my sketch on my table as I work on my quilt as my guide for this project. So we're gonna cut first a long strip, and it's gonna be 3.5 inches, and I'm using a fat quarter here. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the other ruler and I'm going to cut lengthwise 3.5 inches, and this is actually going to give me my squares. So this fabric is double layered, so when I make my first slice, I'll actually have 2 squares. And then when I make my second slice, I'll have 4, and so on and so forth. So for this project, I like to use complementary colors. So I have a white, an in-between color like the light pink, and then a darker shade, which is the maroon. To each their own, but this is something that I like for some fluidity and for some color theory. So you'll need 8 of the white if you decide to do it my way, and then you'll need 8 of the light pink and then 16 of the maroon. So I know you must be wondering how the squares are going to turn into triangles, and I'm going to take you step by step through that. So I am only focusing on my first row, and because the pink squares have faces on them, I'm doing a little bit of fussy placement with those because I want to make sure that the faces are all facing upward in the right direction. So what I did was I actually made a diagonal mark with my pen, and then I'm going to pin it together. That's going to be my stitch line, and so I'm going to do this all the way across for the first row here, and I'm going to make sure that I am following my own pattern on the notebook page. So now I have all of my squares lined up, and I'm going to take these to my sewing machine and I'm going to stitch right along that pen mark that I made, and I'm going to have it match the first row here. So make sure that you're following directly along that stitch line. You want to place your needle right on top of it, backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and of course take your pins out as you're sewing. I forgot to do that on one of the squares, but you guys know my heart. So now here comes one of my favorite parts. Go ahead and open your squares up and you'll see that now you have basically triangles. And again, you want to map out what that looks like. And then what I always do is I like to grab my scissors and do a very, very narrow cut very close to the stitch line. You don't want to cut the stitch line, but you probably want to get close and leave about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, especially since that is the seam allowance that we'll be using to connect the squares. And of course, once you are done snipping that away, you can use the triangles for other projects, or you can just toss them away, but you won't be needing them after you cut them for this project. I'd also like to mention that you definitely want to give this a very, very, very good press. And then of course you want to start attaching your squares. So after pressing mine, I've pinned them on the edges there, and we are going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance to connect those. And once you are done with that, you have essentially finished your first row. And don't forget to take it back to the iron and give it another good press. And you want to press your seams to all going in one direction. That way it's a little bit easier to sew down. So now we have our first row. And we're going to repeat these steps row after row after row. Once you've marked your diagonal lines, take those to the sewing machine and stitch them up. And then go ahead and open them up like before, and then we are going to again cut those triangles. And now you're starting to see with the second row that this is turning into a quilt block, and it should match the sketch that you put on your grid paper. And once again, give those a really good press and then start connecting the squares. And I'm going to show you this go around how that looks. Normally I do like a perpendicular needle placement, but for this one I'm doing it parallel. It just seemed easier for me that way because these pieces are a little small, but you can do it however you want to do it. And again, this is a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you want to make sure that your seam allowances are consistent row by row. That way you have really nicely lined up triangles and squares at the end. So now that we have 2 rows, we're going to go ahead and start connecting these. And so just place it right on top of the other row. And we are going to do perpendicular pinning right here because again, there's a little bit more space to do that. And this will be also a 1/4 inch seam allowance as well. And make sure you take this to your iron after you're done doing that. That way all of your seams are pressed really flat and neat. So I can mark this second row as complete. I like to do that as I go row by row to avoid confusion on my original sketch. And so this is really just a wash, rinse, and repeat process at this point, but you should really start seeing these shapes and patterns really coming together at this point. Because I was starting to feel a little bit more confident in my blocking, I decided to go ahead and get the last row out of the way as well, and basically just kind of have that ready to go once I would be finished with the third row. For the last 2 rows, I decided to try my hand at chain stitching. I'm not a quilter per se. I make mostly garment clothes, as you all know. So some things don't come as naturally to me as they would if I was probably making quilts all the time. But this project has been so much fun and so exciting and whatnot that I'm really enjoying myself. And this chain stitching thing is actually pretty cool too. So I'm going to press these and then connect them. So we're literally in the home stretch. I'm just gonna separate these right quick. And we're gonna do the same thing we did before. I'm checking off another row, and then I'm going right here to make sure I'm following my own pattern here. Okay, so we are all done. At this point, if you want to top stitch it, you can, but for me personally, at this point, this is good to add to the sweatshirt. So I'm using a repurposed sweatshirt that I got from the Goodwill for like $5. And I think it's kind of funny and apropos that it says purpose on there, but unfortunately I'm gonna have to cover that up so that my quilt block can make sense on this sweatshirt. So what I encourage you to do is you could either fold your sweatshirt in half and find the center, or if you have this really cool tool. So if this is the middle, and I know that this is the center seam, this is exactly where it's gonna go. And I'll link this tool down below for everybody, but again, the same method worked for me when I folded my shirt in half and like just put a pin right here. So now at this point, you can use safety pins if you want, or you can use glass pins and pretty much just pin at the corners and in random spots on your quilt block. Make sure that you are not pinning the back of your sweatshirt when you're doing this. So you're gonna have to go underneath the front of your sweatshirt to make sure that this is pinned properly. And you'll want to make sure this is also really smoothed out as well. And I also encourage you to kind of snip away any lines that you, or any pieces of thread that you see and whatnot. You can also do this later too, or you can do it now. And I'm actually going to do a zigzag finish on mine. I like it a little bit better than folding this under. I think it can get a little bulky, and I actually like the zigzag finish a little bit better. It gives kind of like that authentic, raw type feel to it, if you ask me. So I'm going to do it that way. That's how I did the last one as well. So and even as you're bunching this up, still make sure that this is laying flat, because you don't want to have to go back and redo this. And you can do this on the front of your sweatshirt, the back of your sweatshirt. It doesn't even have to be a sweatshirt. It can be a blazer, it can be a jacket, it can be a t-shirt. You can even do this with a tote bag. It's totally up to you, but it's a nice, thoughtful gift as well. And I'm gonna start selling these in my Etsy shop as well, because these kind of got some rave reviews at the last craft fair. I made one, and the one I made was definitely an attention grabber and whatnot. So this will be a regular piece in my Etsy shop. So go ahead and choose the zigzag stitch on your machine. I like to adjust mine to about a 4 and then up to like a 2. But to each their own. Oh my goodness, how cute is that? So I want to thank you guys for coming today and stopping by my channel. If you like this video, don't forget to hit subscribe and like. And if you're not following me already, you can follow me at Raven Maureen on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads as well. I don't know about y'all, but I think I'm ready to go see the color purple. This is so cute. I'm in love. Yeah, see y'all next time. Bye.